I've been reminded by Christina to ensure that the discussion is broad because we have a mix of attendees and panelists spanning B2B as well as B2C, contract pharma services, generics, value-added medicines, specialty branded medicines, as well as some originators, including biotechs, which are at pipeline stage. So I'll ask everyone to just bear that in mind. And this morning, we're going to be talking, I think, about 4 key areas. We're going to be talking about growth, innovation, collaboration, and portfolio value maximization. And you'll get a set, we'll start with a panel who will just introduce themselves shortly. And then thereafter, we have additional 6 15 to 20-minute talks on topics ranging from portfolio transformation through Aspen, drug repurposing, a very exciting topic, portfolio value creation from XGen, which is a US injectables-focused player. And then we have pipeline-related discussions, neuroscience-related discussions, as well as a technology platform player. So a lot of interesting content, and I'm sure something for everyone. With that said, I'm going to shift over and take a seat here to get the panel going for an hour. And what I might ask each of you do, maybe starting with you, Huaizheng, is briefly just introduce yourself, perhaps your role and expertise, and then if you just go around from Huaizheng all the way to Christian, then
Excellent.
We can get stuck in.
Thank you very much. I'm Dr. Huaizheng Peng. I trained to be a medical doctor. I used to be a pathologist in UCL Medical School. But 1997, somehow I have a career turn. I become a portfolio manager in the city, and then I was a investment banker in the city as well. Nowadays, I'm a chief business officer for China Medical System Holdings, which is a specialty pharmaceutical companies publicly listed in Hong Kong Stock Exchange. Unlike other Chinese companies, we are focusing on sales and marketing. Our R&D strategy is so-called externalization R&D. We do not have a wet lab scientist, and we only have a desktop scientist. And therefore, I run this business like a private equity or CVC, corporate venture capital fund. So every year, our company put 20-30% of our company revenue into earmark into something called the CVC, and then I run it like my old business, portfolio management business. I cherry pick globally for the products for my territories. Our mission, our vision is become a MMCs in our region, which is in Pan Asia, ex-Japan, including MENA, including Southeast Asia, even including Australia and New Zealand. Obviously, our mission is bringing global innovations into our territories. We think at least the part of generic drugs can be also innovative. So maybe in the future, later on, we will elaborate that. Thank you.
Morning, all. Great to see a lot of familiar faces here. My name is Anish Mehta. I'm the CEO of a company called Synthon. Synthon is a developer and manufacturer of complex generics, and we're in the B2B space. So our whole business is at looking into the future of products that are going to lose exclusivity 7, 8, 9 years from now, and putting kind of our innovative approach to looking at the complex IP landscape to find interesting workarounds or to find opportunities to bring those products to market sooner. We then do all the wet lab development ourselves. We do all the manufacturing, and then ultimately we go to market through B2B partners, including many of the companies you work for and all the large global generics companies, regional generics companies, and local heroes. We don't specialize in specific therapeutic areas, but our whole angle is around complexity. So, complexity, value-added medicines, how do you find ways to infuse a little differentiation into a generic product that will ultimately end up with slightly less competition and create more value for all the companies that we work with. You know, we're a very purpose and mission-driven company, so it's all about bringing the first available generic to the market. So when we decide to participate, that is really what drives us. And our track record is almost 100% of our launches in the last 10 years have been in the first wave. And I think that is super important. We're global by nature. We do manufacturing in Europe and Latin America, so we're a little different than many of the other developers. So we have a bit of a perspective on what's going to happen with Trump and the tariffs and all of the shenanigans that are going on now. And we are privately held. So we were started 35 years ago, and then Christian will talk about this more, but private equity has woken up to the CDMO, CMO, CRO space. So we were acquired by a private equity firm 5 years ago, and we recently had an exit to another private equity firm, and our company is now, well, soon will be owned by Goldman Sachs. Myself, I've been in the industry 25 years. You can tell by my gray hair. I'm American, but I moved here to London 15 years ago for a one-year assignment, and that year assignment never seemed to end. But I've got a couple of engineering degrees, and then I've spent my whole career in pharma, life sciences, and then, again, the last sort of 15 in generics. So great to be here today.
Thanks. Good morning, everyone. My name is Rabbur Reza, and I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Beximco Pharma. With 30 years in generic industry, I focus on business strategy, portfolio management, and commercial execution, especially in the generic space, also in the value-added generics. That's a term that we use these days. Then big pharma brand as well, and market expansion, and in particular in the emerging markets. My company, Beximco Pharma, is a leading manufacturer in Southeast Asia, and the company is known for its value-added generics. And the company has a presence in almost all continents, including USA, Australia, Canada, and Europe. And actually at company, we focus on innovation and value-driven products, and particularly affordability, so that we can offer products at a cost-effective price globally. And I'm looking forward to insightful discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbur. Good morning, everybody. My name is Navin Thadani. For some reason, I can hear an echo, which is, no, it's okay? Okay, so my name is Navin Thadani. I'm Head of Business Development for Aurobindo Pharma. Aurobindo Pharma is one of the late entrants into the generic space in Europe. We got in probably when everybody else was there, established. But in the last 10 to 12 years, we have really kicked off very strongly. At the moment, our European business is clocking $1 billion in sales, which is, from a retail side, is ahead of many other generic companies. And I think that the approach that we followed was really, it was taking care of everything that we thought was important in the generic space and trying to execute it as well as we could. I've been with the company now, this is my 11th year with Aurobindo. My responsibility is acquisitions, in-licensing, and development. We've been operating in several markets in Europe. We have our direct presence in 9 markets. All of those are the biggest markets within Europe. We've been taking care of markets which are pure generic, like UK, Netherlands. Also the pharmacy-driven markets like France and Spain, where we have a leading position, and also physician-driven markets like Poland. So these 3 realms of operation are actually across the world. I think broadly you'll find these 3 methods of operation. And that's why this kind of experience, and it's really good to be part of this audience, because we can talk about various growth strategies across the world and how it translates not only from a market point of view, but also the manufacturing point of view, because being in the generic space, the manufacturing, where we source products, how we develop products is more important or as important as how we market the products. Thank you very much, and I look forward to a good discussion.
Hi, my name's Christian. I'm an ex-medic as well by background. I've been on the investing side now for close to 12 years, mainly within the pharma and pharma services spaces. For the last, again, nearly 4 years, I've been with Inflexion, and I'm lucky enough to be on the board of CNX Therapeutics, which I know is here today. I'm probably the fraud amongst all of us here in terms of actual insight. I can give the high level investor insight, but the actual execution of things is not my forte. But looking forward to providing an opinion as well. So thank you.
Thank you all. Christian, I think I can attest that I might be the second fraud here. So we'll defer to the four gentlemen on the front line. So first of all, thank you for your introductions. So I think my first question is, I was looking at some data which many of you will be familiar with. I'll start with global branded prescription drug sales because it's an easy metric and everybody will understand it. It was about $550 billion in 2018, and we had a 1.5x increase to $820 billion by 2021 due to COVID. Since 2021, in 22 and 23, we had a couple of flattish years. So global branded prescription drug sales didn't really grow strongly. So my question is, where are we today? What are you seeing in terms of where we are in the market? Any volunteers to perhaps go first, or should I ask maybe someone to start?
I'm happy to.
Yeah, Rabbur, please.
Yes, thank you. Basically, I think you were trying to divulge into that what happened during the last 5 years, right? The things like that. Actually, if we look at the pharma industry for the last 5 years, the curve is totally different compared to traditional curve because of certain things happened in our lifetime, like COVID-19. So if we say the last 5 years has been transformative for the pharmaceutical industry, and it's driven by innovation, partnerships, and global challenges as well. So you rightly say that COVID-19 actually prompted a lot of changes the way we look at business, right? The first and foremost was that fast-tracking the clinical trial. So it redefined the clinical trial, that how quickly a product can be marketed, can come to the market. So, and also, it underscored the importance of supply chain resilience. So coming to your point that why last 2 years or sometime, like if we compare from in 2008 and versus now, all on a sudden there was a surge for vaccine as well as other therapeutics needed for managing COVID-19. So that is possibly came down into 2021. So that is one of the aspects. But other things that if you want me to mention that what are the things that happened during the last 5 years is big partnerships took place. So one of the first one was the partnership between BioNTech and Pfizer. Right, so kind of partnership, it was never imagined, so the mRNA technology came in place. But at the same time, we have seen a lot of other partnerships between big pharma, biotech companies, generics, and also CDMOs, right? So we can give example of a number of partnerships took place between big pharma and number of Chinese companies, we have seen like Roche, and MedLink Therapeutics, they got a deal for $1 billion for antibody drug conjugate. And there are others as well with Chinese companies like GSK and Hansoh Pharma, then Merck, coming with another Chinese companies, then Novartis and Shanghai Agro. So a lot of collaborations took place. Another thing happened is the biotech, or you can say biologic, was very strong. And at the same time, one side was newer biologic drug was coming in the marketplace, but also a A lot of biosimilars came in the market, making it accessible and affordable for people, treatment. So that is another transformation we can see. But pricing pressure has been there, especially in the developed countries, like we can see in USA and in Europe. So honestly speaking, I come from emerging market, and actually as a company, we make more money in the emerging market than going to the developed market. So maybe later on we can talk about that. Other transformation, we can say that the importance of ESG, it has become a part of our life now in pharmaceuticals, So in summary, if we say that last 5 years, the industry has become more interconnected, value-driven, innovation-driven, and also patient-centric. So we have seen a lot of patient-centric activities happening. But the challenge for leaders who are sitting here is basically how we can leverage this thing going forward so that we can create a sustainable, affordable medicine for everyone. Right? Thank you very much. Thank you.
I fully agree with you, but maybe to add a slightly different perspective from the generics angle. So you're all sitting here every day. You make a choice on what industry to work in and what to do. And I think, like all of us, you choose this, whether it's innovative or generics or OTC, ultimately because we make a difference in what we do. And the opportunity for growth, for high margins, solid cash flow, reinvestment is there. And to give you maybe some of the data that we look at from our perspective. So the global generics market is roughly $250 billion, and it has been growing at 4% over the last 5 years and is projected to grow at 6% over the next 5 years. So that's super exciting. That means that market is going to be over $325 billion, which is a lot of opportunity. And in that, you see the number of LOEs coming off in the next 5 years is almost double what it was in the last 5 years. And you see a greater percentage of those into complex medications. So just take one therapeutic category, hematology and oncology, as a proxy for complexity. Very difficult solubility, bioavailability, difficult to handle and manage. You've got micrograms or very low dosages. So you have a lot of this that's driving this forward. And when you look back further upstream, you look at what's in the clinic. What's in the clinic by looking at FDA.gov, and you see like 6,000 small molecules in phase 1 and 2. And that's actually growing at more than 10% a year. So it's an incredibly target-rich opportunity in generics with increasing complexity that will allow for some differentiation and more value capture. So that's kind of looking forward. And you look backwards at the last 5 years. I mean, it's been, I don't need to tell you what's happened. The last 5 years have been probably the most turbulent, disruptive of the last 25 years in the industry, starting obviously with COVID in 2020 and all the supply chain disruptions and the stocking up of product, then 2021, the destocking of product, and then 2022, the Russia-Ukraine crisis, leading to the energy crisis and further supply chain disruptions, the foreign exchange crisis, the dollar-euro fell apart, then in 2023, the Middle East crisis. So I think it's tested all of us and all of you to figure out how do you manage global supply chains, how do you get partnerships done, how do you think about things differently, and you gave some great examples of it. And now, of course, we're in a period of maybe even greater uncertainty with Trump leading the U.S. and what's going to happen. But I think all of that, to be honest, is like, that's noise. The signal here is that fundamentally access to healthcare continues to improve. There's more disease awareness, there's more disease diagnosis, and there's more need for disease treatment. And whether that's on the super basic end of a cardiovascular statin or some super rare ultra orphan disease where there's 1,000 patients across all of Europe. I think the need and the demand is only going to continue to grow, which is why we all need to keep doing what we're doing and figure out how do we bring the cost of development down, how do we bring the probability of success higher, and how do we increase access in a way that, again, maintains healthy competition and healthy profitability.
Great, thank you. I think that's a great summary, Anish and Rabbur. Huaizheng, maybe given the importance of China as and Greater China, if I count, some of the other adjacent regions, as a potential source of growth for the global pharma industry, but where pricing has continued to be an issue and where demographic growth is also slowing down. How do you see the last 2-3 years in your region, and what is your outlook for the next sort of 3 years, 3 to 5 years?
Thank you very much. I'm very, very happy to answer this question. In fact, as I mentioned to you, we are operating in Southeast Asia, great, but we're rooted from mainland China. Mainland China, great majority of our revenue still coming from China. Nowadays, the big picture, big economy issues, everyone knows, uncertainties. So for the last 5 years, we see, because of the pressure, pricing pressure you're talking about, and then how do we provide good, efficient, yet the cost-efficient drugs to the market is quite important. So we see several trends, at least we see several trends in China. Number one is specialized. So more and more companies become more and more specialized. Specialized even for ourselves. In the past, we sell all sorts of drugs. Now we're starting to focus on certain specific therapeutic areas because we have been operating for 35 years. In the past, any drugs into our hands, we like to sell it. This is number one. Number two, when I started to working with the CMAs nearly 20 years ago, as an investor, as a banker, as a board member, as a CBO, so at that time, 80% of drug sales from hospital sales. So gradually, you will see the market dynamic changes. In China, you will see the hospital drug sales starting to coming down. So when I started working in this industry, 85% of the drug sales through the hospitals. Nowadays, 60%. The fastest growing sector is outside hospital sales. Hospital sales. So because nowadays it's accounting for 30%, even for RX drugs. The third the third trend I can see is digitalizations. Digitalization in China. So the AI already built into every aspect or every segment of pharmaceutical industry, including not only in the R&D side, but also in the sales and marketing side. And one more thing I like to add is, at least from my own experience, supply chain. Because in the past, I was always educated like a so-called smell effect, right? The manufacturing always have the lowest margin. So we find then later on we find ourselves was being hijacked by the manufacturers. Okay, so then we have to hold our horse. We can't do the marketing because we couldn't get supply. So I always talk to my colleagues. Nowadays I become an oligopolist. Always ask my CMOs, give me more, please. So therefore, we starting from 2 years ago, we starting try to control our supply as well. So we acquired a facility in Singapore which was owned Pfizer's facility, then sold to an Indian company called Stride. I bought it from Stride. Then we're starting to at least as a backup to my own supply. At least I have somehow plan B. If somehow something goes wrong in Europe or somewhere else, at least I have a place to hide. Okay, so that's and there's other thing, diversification. So in the past, a lot of companies focus on simply oncology or whatever. So or China, obviously China is a low-hanging fruit, but for us, we like to diversify ourselves. We went to Southeast Asia, we went to the Middle East, try to find other cylinder to grow for our company. So that's sort of things in my own experience anyway.
Yeah, please.
So I'll just add a few points. So my context here really is a European focus, and we're probably that small and mid-sized side of companies. So we're not we don't invest in the Aurobindos of this world, but we invest in a smaller segment. And I agree with the macro comments being said here, but actually, if you look historically, from my perspective, I think the real challenge has really been. Sorry, if you look at the market structure, I think there's been an increasing dichotomy developing in the market. So you've got smaller players, small country-focused individual platforms, and then you get the big guys, the Aurobindos of this world. I think on the big side, the reality is we can talk about innovations, which I absolutely agree with on a macro level, but I think from a company level, it's basically a cost of capital play. And I think the real differentiation between those companies, if I'm brutally honest, is your fair market share, i.e. not much. If you look at I'm purely talking from an investor perspective here, I'm not talking from an operational perspective. I think if you look at the smaller companies, they're over the last 5 years, they've been finding their little niches, little tuck-in opportunities, but those are not scalable. They're relevant for the UK, but what's relevant in the UK is not relevant for Germany and vice versa. I think that's just been carrying on over the last 5 years. But if you have to look at a real general theme that's happening in the market, is the fight for growth. And even though everyone quotes that the market's growing at 6% or whatever going forward, quoting a market value of 250 billion, 500 billion, whatever, is not your market. Every company does not fish in a $500 billion market. If someone says that to me, just as FYI as a management team, I turn off straight away because it means you don't understand the way you play. I think what you really need to do is define your end market. So with CNX, we sort of view our end market as probably 2 billion out of all that noise within Europe. And I think you have to look at what drives growth there and try and search for growth there. And over the last few years, and looking forward, I think you'll see a transition in business strategy and plan. So legacy operating models, legacy strategies are no longer working. So if I take an example in the UK, for wind back 5-10 years ago, price rises were, in the market that we were looking at, price rises were the name of the game. Frankly, that is now toxic. So that is just not a strategy that works going forward. So you're getting a lot of companies looking to reposition their offering within the marketplace. So and that's created. So for example, take the largest sort of mature product players, the Advances, the Pharma of this world. All they're talking about now is value-added medicines and looking for organic growth. And that's a tough play because it's a complete change in strategy from what they're doing. So looking forward, I think people are increasingly focused on pipeline, which is a great opportunity for the Synthons of this world and the likes. But that's, I think, the real challenge that you're seeing in the market today is finding that new growth vector and that reason to be differentiated.
Great. Thank you all. So I think just to recap, it sounds like at the macro level, we've come out of a turbulent period, but we're still pretty optimistic about the structural growth and opportunity in the sector. I think there are some important themes. Rabbur talked about the attractiveness of domestic markets. Price, Christian, you referred to it as well, is a challenge. And then Huaizheng, you talked about specialization. I do agree. I think we're also seeing a bit of a dichotomy between the macro and the micro. And maybe that's a good segue to perhaps get a bit more specific about the micro sources of growth that you all see in each of your spaces. We also see, since many of you come from specialty branded or the generic side, there is a big patent cliff that's looming over the next 5 years. It is quite biologics heavy. So if you strip that out, how big is it? Is a bit of a question. There's a tension always between being flexible across therapeutic areas, but being deep enough to have synergy. So maybe I'll say, any comments on, very specific areas that you see traction in terms of strategies to drive growth in each of your businesses?
Yeah, sure. I'll take a shot at that. So, first of all, just picking up from the point that small companies, everyone's looking for this market share growth. The way you spoke about, everybody's trying to find that niche. Where is that growth going to come from? And I think that, if you look at, the lack of a trend or lack of a change is also a trend. So, for example, in markets like Italy or France, Italy, people have been saying for 10, 15 years, the market model is going to change and it's going to get, perhaps more price competitive. And it never happens because the local market is devised in a way that it's incentivizing the current companies to stay there, innovator companies to do nothing else, and the government to do nothing else. So the market model will not change. In that situation, what happens is that if you've got the market presence in that market, then you can make the money. You need to have the critical mass in a market in order to really make that market work. You can't have, I've never seen a company who says, I'm going to launch 10 generic molecules in France and then I'm going to be successful at it. It will simply not work. So you've got to have the critical mass, and the critical mass brings you the additional opportunities. Without that critical mass, you might say, I'm going to a niche segment. It's not going to work because you need to have that space. There are certain companies who, in very refined segments, have been able to be successful, but they are really very far and few. If we're looking at where is the growth going to come from in the future, we're talking a lot about biosimilars. All the gentlemen on the table have mentioned biosimilars, and it's really a space for growth because it's not only the biosimilars, but you see biotech itself is going in that space where more drugs are biotechnology originated. And therefore, the biosimilars are a great space, but biosimilars is not a space that everyone can get into. How many of us in this room have the capability to put, let's take a conservative estimate, $50 million on the development of a biotechnology drug? That's fine, you can put the money there. But the probability of success of that drug, so you're putting $50 million on a 0 or a 1 chance. It's a 0 or a 1. How many of us can afford to do that? And the 0 or a 1 is not just on the development side, it's also on the marketing side. Because somebody else comes up with something value added to that biosimilar, and you are then struggling to get it back. So the source of growth, the macroeconomics, the sources of growth are clear. The issue is how do you approach this?
Store scalable presence in defined markets was one. Picking products carefully was a second. Financing was a third. Anybody else want to, from your companies, talk about a specific example or a specific strategy that you have deployed that has yielded some success for you in terms of winning market share or above average? So, if you say growth from Anish's figures is 6%, what is enabling you to outperform the underlying growth in your defined market? Any specific examples?
You see, if you ask me, I think we have been talking about different portfolio management and kind of thing, but also you have given the example of European markets, but I come from Southeast Asia, country, and I want to give you some perspective that for growth, definitely product portfolio is very important, but demography is also critical, that how we can continue the momentum of growth. So traditionally, if we look at the developed markets, especially US and Europe has driven the pharma growth traditionally. But I think the way economic growth is taking place in Asia, like China or India, and the emerging markets, I think pharma growth is also going to come from, those markets. So I need to just reflect on a few things there. You see, I don't know how many of you know that how many people are living in the emerging markets. So we start from there. So the emerging markets, if you consider Asia, Africa, and Latin America, 6.8 billion people are living in these markets. 6.8 billion people. Then another fact, you see 25 million births are taking place in China every year. And in India, 20 million. Sorry, in India, 25 million, and China, 20 million. So think about that how many vaccines would be needed in these markets, how many pediatric treatments would be needed in these markets. I'm just talking about the kind of demography you may consider. Other aspect, if you narrow down, if you talk about Southeast Asian market where Singapore, Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia, Bangladesh, these markets fall, 4% of the total global market, basically this region. It's not small, 4% of the total global market. I think some people, we overlook that the potential of these markets. And also, that Anish was saying about the growth of market, generic markets, and you're talking about 4% growth in the marketplace. In Southeast Asia, we had 7.5% CAGR last 5 years. So you can see the kind of growth taking place. Another dynamics I would mention here, I think that would be more interesting. You see, we think that Asian markets or the emerging markets are basically, we need more of communicable diseases, infections and kind of thing. That is there. But the major growth is coming in these markets from non-communicable diseases like diabetes, then hypertension, then cancer. These diseases are surging in these markets. I'll give you some data. Say, basically, you see that 75% of total diabetic population, at present around 537 million estimate is the diabetic people, 75% people live in these markets, 75%. So think about the market for diabetic portfolio in these markets. 2/3 of hypertensive people live in these markets, 2/3. At the same time, cancer is also surging. So if any company, say any European company and other places, if you think that you want to grow, one is definitely product portfolio and collaboration, everything. My suggestion is also look at demography, look at the emerging markets. And my company, Beximco Pharma, is saying that we are operating in almost 60 countries, including US and Europe. But we get more money, more profit through our specialized product from the emerging markets. But if you think the model that's working in Europe, it may not work in the emerging market. So our portfolio has to be tailored. Partnership has to be tailored. You have to work with local manufacturers because many countries, they do not promote import of pharmaceutical finished products. So you need to go for the partnership. You need to go for out licensing in those markets. So I think the final note I would like to make here is that for growth, just don't think that, okay, emerging market is an option. No, I think in our portfolio, we can say it is necessary, but we need to understand how we go there, all right? So I think that's one thing that I wanted to highlight here, that I think emerging market could be one of the growth markets for the pharmaceuticals in the coming years. Thank you.
I can't agree more, sir. I can't agree more, sir. For us, for CMS, we have been operating for nearly 35 years. Our GAG growth is roughly about 25 to 30% year on year. So we are very proud of it. And my job is making our salespeople busy. So virtually all the companies, the transactions I get involved, I see be at. Okay, so I can't agree more. Geographic growth in the past, the China is for us the comfort zone, very low high influence. Nowadays, we see the future of Southeast Asia. We see the future of Middle East and Africa. So we are moving there heavily. How to get there? Very important. Localization is a very important matter because it's a so heterogeneous market. Okay, this is the first point I want to really echo on you. The second point is on the product side. Product side, how do we find the growth on the product side? You mentioned the biosimilar. You obviously for us, for our company, innovative drugs is very important. I licensed the inside drug. At the same time, old dog can also do the tricks. Okay, so for me, later on you ask, well, how do we sort of investment or whatever, I will cover that. And for me, we become a biggest shareholder of a company in San Diego, and then those companies formulated very old, the old drug even older than me. Okay, so it's diazepam, from IV diazepam, Roche diazepam to the nasal spray for the epilepsy. So we sell like a weed. Our company built up to sell a very old-fashioned Lumbex antidepressant medicine. When I joined the company nearly 15 years ago, officially using this business card, my job is to dilute down that impact because that one single drug accounts for 70% of our company revenue, which is old antidepressant medicine, TCA.
Yeah, proven accelerated.
The TCA, but all the other market are phasing out, depending on really how do you sell it. So we reposition this drug from antipsychotic medicine to a general CNS medicine and made it. The second drug recently I licensed from a U.S. company is a ganatamine. It's an old dementia medicine, right? So dementia medicine, but have a side effect of GI. This company reformulated to a pro drugs. Therefore, reduce the side effect, still keep the efficacy. So I licensed that drug. That's why I said even the innovative drugs companies will still incorporate generics. We think some generic drugs are also value-added generics are also innovations.
Yeah, I think definitely agree with that. Thank you for those specifics, Huaizheng. Christian, you had.
Yeah, I was just going to give a bit of colour. I think again, I come from that slightly smaller and mid-sized scale, but so picking on from my earlier comment about evolution and growth, I think if you look historically, a lot of companies, they've just tried to in-license things where it looks a bit opportunistic and it's a bit of growth. I think going forward, people need to really understand and define what they are. This again, speaking from an investment perspective, but you need to generate platform value. And the platform value, what is that? You're investing in people, product, channel, TA or regulatory expertise, one or all of those, across multiple geographies in an ideal world. And you need, whatever your focus, you can't be all of those. You need to say, right, I'm going to be the best at channel access in these countries, or I'm going to be the best at regulatory something or other for this type of product group or this type of development. And when you have that and you're really focused, then you can differentiate in terms of what you in-license, what you can pay for stuff, what you acquire. If you don't do that, you're not differentiated. And within that context as well, you need to be very disciplined. So you need to be willing to say no to opportunities as well as yes. And human nature is to say yes to everything. But actually, over the longer term, you do not build platform value. And you see it in the market now from an investor perspective. You look at companies and say, I don't know what you are. So that's just another point.
Yeah, I think, Christian, I think those are very helpful comments. And, I guess moving a little bit into the BD&L direction, business development, licensing, partnering dimension. So you made the case for, being hyper-focused about what your value creation hypothesis is from an in-licensing perspective. And, companies across the scale spectrum, talk a lot about that. And the reality is, we work with a lot of companies where, we define those strategies, we run the screening, etc. You end up with a fairly often, even for big companies, narrow list of transactable opportunities. And often, 5 or 10 other companies have done the same exercise and they have the same list or a similar list. And then there's the ability to pay question. So I guess my question here off the back of that is, how do you balance the very cogent case you put for being clear about your value creation hypothesis and being specific for the types of deals and assets you want to partner on, versus the reality that it's a small list likely, and that you may not be able to convert?
Well, again, I'm not the operator, but from my side, when I look at sort of the board level, I think, to your point, it depends on your definition. But I actually think typically, if you major on one of those things I mentioned before, there is typically a lot of opportunity, but you just have to look at a different product group. So, for example, there may be relevant tuck-ins of classic little generic products because they fit in a TA in a certain market, but you have the channel insight or capability to do it. You then look at the value-added medicine bit, that can fit in there. So, and then depending on your scale, you can go a bit more adventurous in some form of incremental innovation. But I think you have to keep a broad, to your point, sort of funnel, but they can still all be relevant for what you're trying to build. And, well, again, I'm talking from the perspective of that small mid-sized company at CNX. We have no issue with identifying opportunities and identifying product flow. In fact, we have too much of it, and we need to whittle it down and go for the best. Again, just to pick on Aurobindo all the time because you're sitting next to me, but I appreciate at a different scale it becomes a slightly different game. But the flip side is, their value add will become about, effectively, as I said before, cost of capital. It's about cost of production. It's about getting the lowest cost and putting it into the market. It's a different play. But you have to, whatever you're strong at plays across different product categories, but you need to be very disciplined and know what you're looking for to really have that strategic value.
Yeah, if I add to that, I think the common theme here is it's a huge market. There's a lot of opportunity. You look at product categories and markets and customers and all that. You have to first start by figuring out what your company is great at, or what your company wants to be. And once you figure that out, then you have to do the exercise of who do you want to partner with and how are you going to generate value. And maybe a slightly contrarian view for a BD&L meeting is, success isn't measured by the number of meetings you have. Right? I mean, there's all these meetings that happen every couple of months, and then all of our team as well, they come back and say, oh, we met with 100 people. That's great. But how many of the 100 people are relevant for what we're offering? And we at Synthon are an enabler of growth, right? We are a B2B player. Our whole thesis is around finding what we're good at, which is bringing complex products to market at or before market formation in a sustainable way, controlling our supply chain, not only for launch, but for replenishment. And when we do that, and we find those partners that value that, we spend our time talking to them. And then we go to the markets where maybe a market structure is that local heroes are the ones that help you get market share rather than global leaders. And then we curate a mix of partners and we try and focus our time on that. And I think you guys all know this, but as BD&L professionals, figuring out what your company is great at and finding those players in the relevant markets, in the relevant areas that you want to really build relationships with is what I would recommend. Because again, it's not about the numbers, it's about finding the CNXs or we talked about Italy, Doc Generisi or Biogaran or whoever it may be, in specific categories, they win. And when you can find those players and you can understand what their strategy is about and what drives their growth, then you work that backwards into what you want to do, and that's how we choose. So we don't go out and say we're the supermarket of generic drugs. 40 LOEs next year, we're going to do all 40. Come to Synthon. We don't do that because that's not a source of growth for us, and that's not a differentiator. And I mentioned before, we just went through a process of selling the company, and we had a significant amount of interest, and a lot of that interest was based on not only financial performance. We had double-digit CAGR growth and the top and bottom line, but it was about being able to very, very clearly articulate a value proposition in like 2 sentences. And I think that's what investors understood and they could get behind. That's right. And that's kind of how we think about it. And again, everyone needs to find what is their angle. And when you find that angle, you know, for us, we don't do biosimilars. Everyone talks about what a huge growth opportunity it is, and it is. There's no question. But to Navin's point, that binary risk is not something that we are comfortable taking. So we're moving beyond biosimilars into peptides, or we're moving into oligonucleotides, or we're moving into other areas that don't have binary risk. And that's how we've designed the risk profile for our company.
You know, a lot of your comments make me think perhaps the better title would have been growth through collaboration. I think we're going to wrap up, but maybe in the last minute, because I guess Anish alluded to it. Anish, I guess, if you have a view on tariffs and their impact, you know, I'm sure the audience would benefit from getting a quick sense of that, and then we can wrap.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you can just imagine for a moment to be in Trump's shoes. I know it's probably a scary thought, but if you do that and you reconfigure your brain to say, and I'm American, but I've been living in Europe for 15 years, so I think I have a good perspective on it. It really is about this America First thing, and the misbalance between tariffs that are charged on products exported out of the U.S. versus products that are imported to the U.S. And all he's trying to do is level the playing field. And in certain industries, it probably makes sense. But I think when you think about pharmaceuticals, and especially generic pharmaceuticals, the only way this strategy makes sense is if you have enough domestic capacity at the right price point in order to shift production from overseas to the U.S. And everyone knows, you look at the top 10 generic players in the U.S., with the exception of Sando, they're all Indian companies. There is no high-quality, low-cost production in the U.S. 80 or 90% of the products are imported. So I think while there's a lot of talk and bluster and so forth around this, I think the reality of it is that it's just not going to happen. And it'll lead to short-term, if it happens, it will lead to short-term price increases, which obviously isn't going to be tolerated by neither the commercial channel or the government channel, and then prices will come back down. But if he's trying to stimulate domestic production, it's just not possible. There's Biosecure Act, and there's all these other things that are going on, but at the end of the day, it is a capitalistic-driven market, and at the end, price and quality win, and the domestic production isn't there. So now our company, we manufacture in Europe and in Latin America, so I mean, we are watching this anxiously, that in case there are tariffs, how do we take advantage of it? So again, it's about understanding what you're good at, and one of our spikes is non-India, non-Chinese manufacturing. Good or bad, that's one of the things we do well, and we do low-cost manufacturing. So it's keeping a very close eye on these kinds of things, having very, very good open channels with people to say if there's an opportunity, seize it. And I think whether it's in innovative or generics or biosimilars or small molecules, I think everyone up here will agree agility is probably the #1 characteristic of successful companies. See it, don't overthink it, and just go and get it. And that's what enables companies to outperform the market. The ones who overanalyze it, they miss the opportunity.